Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of What Did the Patient Say with Doctors Dana and Lauren Brindisi, sisters and owners of Carolina Functional Neurology Center. We are bringing you inside information from real conversations we have with patients on a daily basis. We get asked the same questions and want to spread the truth on health and healing because we believe everyone deserves to know the answers.
Hi guys, welcome back to our second episode of What Did the Patient Say? One of the most important topics that we thought that we wanted to start with was that we hear a lot of patients tell us that other providers are telling them that their symptoms are either all in their head or it's because they have anxiety. And we just don't believe that to be true for the majority of the patients that we see. And you may have been in a situation like that before, and we're kind of here to tell you that it's very common because a lot of times people feel alone when they're told those things. And, it's probably not the case.
Yeah, I actually just had this conversation a couple times this week because we definitely hear it very, very often that it's getting chalked up to anxiety, but the reality is just anxiety means that there's likely something else going on, and we really shouldn't belittle the idea that it's just anxiety. Because usually when we see patients who are dealing with some level of anxiety, when we look at the function of the nervous system, we see things going on that could create symptoms and can make people feel anxious. So we definitely, when someone feels anxious, I think it's really important that we start to dig a little bit deeper at what's going on with the physiology and the function of their nervous system, not just chalk it up to anxiety, like that's a normal thing that people should be experiencing on an everyday basis.
Yeah, I feel like the conversation I have with a lot of patients, especially even just on the first phone call when they come in to do the complimentary consultation that we do like this via telehealth, is over and over and over again. That's what people are told. And the conversation that I always have with them is that while you may have anxiety or that you may feel anxious, it's typically not that anxiety is causing all of the symptoms that you have. But what does happen is, let's say you have a low level anxiety anyway, then you started to have symptoms creep up. So you're feeling dizzy, you are getting headaches, you have tingling in your body, you're having trouble moving your muscles, things are twitching, whatever it may be. Inevitably, whether you suffered from anxiety before or not, those symptoms that you don't know where they're coming from, you don't know what's going on in your body to cause it, is going to create you to feel anxious. And then when you feel anxious, it further drives those symptoms to get worse, because as you feel more anxious about the symptoms, it's generating stress responses in your body, which inevitably is going to exacerbate really anything that you are feeling.
Yeah, and another thing that we talk about with patients every day, just from our rehab perspective, is this idea of neuroplasticity and how the brain is always changing and adapting to our environment. So that includes thoughts. So if you are anxious, and just like Dr. Dana said, is then you start to have symptoms that make you worried about your overall health and well-being. Now you get this limbic and emotional response to it, and they get tied together. So it can become this vicious cycle and this constant feedback loop where the two are really perpetuating each other. But it should never just be chalked up to just anxiety, because that means that there's a reason that's happening. We all have some level of anxiety because it is a response to stress. But when it gets to a point where it's disrupting your life, then we're looking at more of a clinical aspect of it, and it shouldn't be put into a category of just anxiety. I hate that, the word just in front of it, as if it's something that doesn't need some type of intervention, or we shouldn't be digging deeper as to what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good point, because like just anxiety, well, it's significant for so many people. And then, like you said, significant when you're experiencing all of these symptoms. And another point, I think to piggyback on what you said, is that we always talk about creating neuroplasticity, and when we talk about things like anxiety, we're looking at the limbic system and, the wind up that's created when you feel anxious or you have these abnormal stress responses. And we talk about neuroplasticity oftentimes in a good way, because we're creating neuroplasticity, we're changing your brain function. This is how functional neurology works. And it, results in great things for a lot of people. But the flip side to that is your body creates neuroplasticity that isn't always favorable to us in terms of how we feel. Your brain is really looking for efficiency, but it's not really discriminating whether that efficiency is good for you, meaning it's improving how you're feeling, or maybe not so good for you and it's causing symptoms or perpetuating symptoms. And like the conversation I have with a lot of people is, I'm like, when you create neuroplasticity, it's like changing the connection between the neurons from like a 1-lane road from Miami to Key West to like a 7-lane highway on Pacific Coast Highway in California, right? It's like we are trying to generate this very efficient machine, but you've got to do it in the right way, because you can also create negative neuroplasticity that is going to drive your symptoms. And I think that's where a lot of patients are at when they end up in our office, because they've been feeling these things for quite some time. And it's perpetuating itself.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would say some of I feel like we hear that across the board with most patients that we see, but I would say we see it very commonly with dysautonomias, because again, patients are dealing with such a multitude of symptoms that seem like they're attributed to different systems in the body. Yeah. So they're being shuffled around from specialist to specialist, and all their labs are normal, so nobody can figure out what's going on. So it must be anxiety. And then same thing, we see that with patients after they've had concussions, right? And maybe we're just running an impact test that's looking more at cortical function, and they're missing balance, eye movements, autonomic function. And these patients are now having anxiety that they otherwise didn't have before a trauma. I think very common after vertigo. What do you think, Dana? What other patients do you see it with?
Yeah, I was saying, I think we talk about it a lot with our chronic pain patients, right? So like huge with migraines, right? Pain is, it perpetuates itself again. So the more efficient your body is at being in pain or being dizzy or, whatever, it's just like it's driving that system. And yeah, if you wake up every day and you're in pain, you're dizzy, you're this, you're that, or the other thing, I would feel anxious. You know what I mean? That would make me feel anxious.
Yeah.
Is that the anxiety that's causing it? No, there's got to be something else driving that factor. But I will say, there is also cases where you have extreme anxiety that does mimic a lot of symptoms like that. And to your point, it's not just anxiety, right? And that's where I think we can help patients navigate too, is like, is this anxiety, is anxiety the true driving factor to why you have these symptoms? Or is it this vicious feedback cycle where you have these symptoms, so it makes you feel anxious, and then you feel anxious, so it makes the symptoms worse? Yeah, it also does go, the other scenario is real, right? Like physical symptoms of anxiety do really exist for people too.
Yeah. And that's important to address. And I think what's great is we can kind of address it from multiple perspectives, whether that's co-managing with a therapist, or whether that's, working with a health coach in terms of talking about the major stressors in people's lives and how they can try to unwind some of those external factors that may be perpetuating and causing anxiety that makes it difficult for them to heal and repair. What I think would be kind of cool is if anybody feels comfortable, maybe commenting below and talking about maybe something you've dealt with that has been chalked up to just anxiety, and maybe sharing a little bit. I think there's a lot of people out there who have dealt with that, and it can be really therapeutic in itself to just know that you're not alone.
Yeah, that was the other part I wanted to say, was just like, if you've ever come across this, if you've ever been told, by anybody, healthcare professional or otherwise, that like, oh, it's just anxiety, go meditate, whatever. You're not alone. This is something that I think so many of our patients experience before they get to our office, and again, kind of like we were saying in the introduction to this series, is we want you guys to understand that you're not alone, because when you deal with this like in isolation, maybe like in your family, and even if you have supportive people in your life, like if you're not wearing a cast, or you got a big eye patch and scar on your face or whatever it is, right? Like when you don't have a visible, tangible injury that people can see, people feel very lonely in that situation. And you're not alone, and you might feel lonely, and I understand that. I think we both understand that. But you're not alone, because so many people are in the same situation and unfortunately have been told the same things over and over and over again. And it is not condition specific. It's very common kind of across the board that we see.
Yeah, and I would agree, especially with those invisible illnesses that are very complex and a lot of people don't understand, or they're not very common. So you may be the only person in your circle that is dealing with something like that. And it can be difficult for other people to grasp and understand. And that definitely can be challenging, and that can create anxiety in itself. So I think opening a discussion about anxiety and how real it is for all of us, and that there's a lot of avenues to help, and often there are things from a more therapeutic perspective, like we do from a neurological rehab perspective, that can be done to help break those vicious cycles and start unwinding the tie of your symptoms and your anxiety, and get everything to start calming down.
Yeah. And I kind of made a note about meditation when I kind of said it jokingly, but in reality, and I kind of want to put this out there because this is something that I utilize in my own day-to-day that has been helpful for me just in general. Meditation can be very helpful. I think a lot of people have this misconception of you have to be really good at it for it to be effective. And that's not really how it works. It's just the practice of doing it. And I think that's why they call it practice, is just learning how to take your state, your mindful state, and transition it. And a lot of times people want to use it as well, I'm feeling super stressed, so now I'm going to try and meditate, when really it needs to be a consistent practice. So that when you encounter that added stress, your brain has created enough neuroplasticity, and it's activating and generating brain waves in a way that is helping to keep that stress response for you, even though you're exposed to the stressor, low.
Yeah.
So there's an app, it's called brain.fm, and like full disclosure, like we don't have any affiliation with them, but it's just something that I have really liked and have been utilizing. And you can use it for a lot of different ways. So they do guided and unguided meditations. They do creative like workflows, like focus app part of the app, or sleep part of the app, or there's different options out there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But all of it is based on neuroscience research of sound. And they're actually utilizing all of that neuroscience research to help create and generate neuroplasticity in the brain as you're listening to these programs. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like everybody could download this app. I think it's like $100 for the entire year, and you could use it for every hour of your day, whether you're sleeping or awake. So I just think that that's super cool. And if you do find yourself in a position where you are under a lot of stress, whether it's health related things or otherwise, or you've been told that you have anxiety, I think this is a really good tool that whether you have a provider that you're seeing or going to see, like you could use it, and it could be very beneficial if you stick to the practice of, doing it consistently.
Yeah, definitely a daily practice and finding a routine and where to do it. Something that I just started doing is actually, I have SiriusXM in my car, and they have a spa channel. So on my way to work, instead of like doing my mental to-do list about all the things I need to get done throughout the day on top of seeing patients, is that already was creating a stress response. So I'd show up to work already feeling like I had to think about so many different things. Is now I'm just doing like a driving, I would say maybe more mindfulness than full meditation, but I'm just listening to that, and I'm trying really hard not to think about all the things throughout my day. And it has been wonderful, because I feel like I come in feeling a lot more focused, and I end up getting more done because I haven't perpetuated that stress response. And we waste so much time overthinking that we don't get as much done as if we would have spent a little extra time clearing our mind, and then being able to focus at each task at hand.
I've been using Beyonce for that lately.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to our second episode.
Yes.
If there's
Thanks for joining us. Comment if you've ever experienced anything like this. If you feel comfortable sharing your story, we'd love to hear from you, and I'm sure other people would love to hear from you as well. And make sure you tune into our Instagram. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to be posting more and more as time goes on. And we look forward to sharing with you guys as much content as we can.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.